Welcome to the new video of NeuroPhilos. Get ready to dive into a gripping tale that will leave you breathless, thinking, and inspired. Whether you're here for the mystery, the drama, or the unexpected twists, you're in the right place. Make sure to hit that like button, drop a comment, and subscribe so you never miss another powerful story. Let's begin. The illusion of control. Each morning you awaken convinced of agency. Movements feel deliberate, routines appear self-chosen, ambitions seem personal. Yet beneath that certainty lives a quiet architecture of instruction. Long before comprehension, 1,000 invisible hands choreographed conduct, voices urging compliance, bells dictating rhythm, gestures shaping posture. What feels like independence is choreography rehearsed since childhood. The earliest lessons never spoke the word obedience, they performed it. The first reprimand for noise in class, the stern look after breaking formation, the small prize for punctuality, all tiny rehearsals for a lifelong theater of regulation. Approval and shame replaced chains and locks. Through repetition, you learn that safety lives inside boundaries drawn by others. Modern order does not roar, it whispers. It dresses in politeness, productivity, and moral language. No guards march beside you, yet walls travel within every gesture. The office clock, the report deadline, the polite smile after exhaustion, each silently enforces expectation. What once required lash and sell now thrives through admiration of efficiency. Control has learned elegance. Authority's brilliance lies in invisibility. It persuades rather than compels. Words like responsibility, discipline, and success disguise instruction as virtue. Children grow into adults who no longer need reminders, they monitor themselves with pride. They call fatigue dedication, anxiety commitment, conformity maturity. The lesson succeeds when the learner forgets it was taught. Every institution perfects this craft. Education arranges minds through hierarchy of grades, workplaces convert hours into measurable loyalty, entertainment prescribes emotion through curated desire. Even rest becomes scheduled recovery for further output. Existence turns into performance for unseen judges whose applause is mere approval ratings, paychecks, or social validation. The theater never ends, only changes costumes. Within that performance, individuality feels celebrated yet measured. Unique expression must remain marketable, rebellion profitable, eccentricity photogenic. Systems tolerate difference only when it strengthens the narrative of freedom. Thus, rebellion itself becomes domesticated. You tweet outrage, stream dissent, purchase liberation packaged as lifestyle. The cage redecorates itself with neon slogans of choice. Meanwhile, attention, your most precious currency, is harvested. Screens glow, metrics rise, notifications punctuate consciousness. Algorithms whisper what to crave, who to envy, when to rest. Each gesture feeds data loops designing tomorrow's desires before you sense them. You become predictable by design, shaped by feedback that flatters ego while mapping limitation. Autonomy erodes through convenience. The belief in merit finalizes captivity. You are told success rewards effort, failure signals laziness. This myth sanctifies inequality and keeps competition eternal. Everyone runs faster on identical treadmills, mistaking exhaustion for progress. Satisfaction becomes unreachable because the finish line keeps migrating. When collapse arrives, guilt replaces blame, I should have managed better. The whip moved inside. Observe any city morning. Trains pulse with synchronized faces, phones mirror identical glows, conversation repeats slogans disguised as opinion. Behind every routine beats a collective heartbeat programmed for output. Noise fills the void where wonder once lived. People hurry toward goals they never authored. And the tragedy, they call this stability. Yet awareness begins in discomfort. A fleeting question pierces habit: why this pattern? Who benefits from my obedience? That moment threatens centuries of conditioning. Systems fear curiosity more than rebellion, because questioning dissolves illusion. When one person sees the strings, the puppet's show falters. Therefore, culture teaches distraction, endless tasks, entertainment loops, algorithmic applause, anything to prevent stillness long enough to notice control's texture. Freedom, in this context, cannot mean absence of rules. It begins with recognition of their origins. To see conditioning is to weaken it. The gaze that once monitored can reverse direction. You can observe the observer. You can witness yourself following reflexes and quietly interrupt them. In that pause, something sacred happens, space for deliberate choice. But awakening carries weight. Once perception expands, innocence disappears. You cannot unsee the machinery grinding beneath daily smiles. The comfort of ignorance evaporates, leaving both terror and possibility. You stand between habit and intention, hearing echoes of every order ever obeyed, realizing they no longer define you. That trembling awareness is the birth of genuine agency. The illusion of control dissolves not through rebellion alone but through comprehension. To understand how conditioning operates is to reclaim authorship of existence. True mastery arises when direction springs from consciousness, not compulsion. Each deliberate breath, each mindful refusal, each moment of silence amid noise becomes resistance. Life, once dictated, turns into creation. The door to autonomy never locks from the inside. It waits for perception sharp enough to notice hinges. The first act of liberation is seeing the invisible. The second is choosing what deserves your obedience. Everything after that is the slow art of becoming real. From whips to rules, the birth of the disciplinary society. Once, authority announced itself with spectacle. The square became a theater of screams, guilt was carved into flesh for the crowd's moral instruction. The scaffold stood as civilization's pulpit, teaching fear through demonstration. Kings preserved order by dismembering rebellion before a mesmerized public. Pain served as pedagogy, horror preserved hierarchy. Power loved visibility then, it needed witnesses to sustain reverence. But spectacle decayed. The audience began to pity the condemned, not adore the crown. The line separating justice from cruelty blurred under sunlight. When empathy contaminated fear, rulers sensed peril. To survive, domination had to change its costume. It traded crimson robes for white coats, whips for regulations, chains for timetables. Punishment retreated from plazas into institutions. The age of discipline began. Discipline transformed cruelty into calculation. No longer satisfied with retribution, it sought prevention. Bodies were not to be destroyed but trained, minds not silenced but synchronized. The prison became prototype, the school, the factory, the hospital followed its blueprint. Every corridor echoed the same intention: transform chaos into predictability. The human being turned into an instrument calibrated for usefulness. Architecture itself joined the conspiracy. Rows of desks replaced crowds. Corridors ensured supervision without spectacle. Bells synchronized hundreds of hearts to identical rhythms. The body learned submission through repetition until obedience felt natural. This was a revolution without banners, efficiency replacing terror, precision supplanting spectacle. Society discovered that quiet control lasts longer than blood. Discipline admired measurement. It adored statistics, schedules, and documentation. Each rule promised improvement, each ledger hid judgment. Progress became a polite name for surveillance. The observer no longer punished disobedience, he prevented its birth. Systems perfected themselves by anticipating deviation before it occurred. In that anticipation lived the real miracle of modern power, invisible influence disguised as order. The school served as laboratory for this new science. Rows of chairs faced a single voice, curiosity became measurable, imagination bowed to curriculum. The child was not educated, it was formatted. Each grade resembled a checkpoint on the path from spontaneity to compliance. The once wild imagination learned geometry not for beauty but for discipline of thought. Knowledge turned into obedience rendered abstract. The soldier mirrored the student. Marching feet learned harmony before ideology. Uniforms erased individuality, turning difference into error. Every salute rehearsed deference to unseen command. Meanwhile, the worker adapted the same rhythm, trading drumbeats for factory bells. Productivity replaced patriotism, yet both demanded synchronization. Control migrated from parade grounds to assembly lines without losing precision. Even compassion joined the project. Hospitals catalogued bodies through diagnosis. Healing became measurement of deviation from the average. Charts defined normality, prescriptions corrected rebellion inside tissue. The patient lay beneath the same analytical gaze that once belonged to inquisitors, only now draped in benevolence. Care became another mechanism for normalization. The beauty of this design lay in its subtlety. Nobody felt forced, everyone felt guided. Suffering vanished, replaced by self-correction. People called it progress, humanity, civilization. But beneath the polished surface pulsed the same intention, to make every gesture calculable. Punishment no longer screamed, it whispered through appointments, forms, evaluations, schedules. The baton turned into paperwork. And because discipline offered comfort, order, safety, routine, it earned loyalty. Citizens internalized authority as responsibility, mistaking adaptation for virtue. To follow the plan meant belonging, to question it meant pathology. Thus control evolved beyond resistance, it colonized desire itself. The perfect subject did not require coercion, he craved approval. This transformation birthed what Foucault called the docile body, a creature neither enslaved nor free, capable of movement yet governed by invisible choreography. Muscles remembered instruction long after supervision disappeared. The gaze of authority implanted itself like a second heartbeat. People behaved correctly even when alone, fearing dissonance more than punishment. Society applauded this miracle. Cities grew orderly, industries efficient, classrooms quiet. But silence carried a cost. The price of peace was spontaneity, the sacrifice for progress was interior wilderness. Every deviation, every creative spark, every uncontrolled emotion threatened equilibrium. So the system refined its medicine until even rebellion looked structured. What once was violence became method. What once was domination became discipline. The executioner vanished into bureaucrats, teachers, doctors, managers. The sword dissolved into ink. Control dispersed through routines, forms, technologies, so perfectly that victims began thanking their captors for stability. Humanity entered a new era, an age where freedom was tolerated only when it served productivity. Understanding this transition reveals the genius of modern authority. It discovered permanence through gentleness, submission through efficiency, compliance through comfort. The whip left scars, rules leave habits. Habits reproduce themselves long after power changes hands. That continuity ensures the machine endures. Yet knowing this history also cracks its spell. When you see the mechanisms turning, they lose magic. Awareness interrupts automation. The same eye that once observed can now look back. And in that reversal lies the seed of liberation, the moment when obedience realizes it has options. The Panopticon Within. Imagine an architecture so perfect it no longer needs walls. A structure built entirely from awareness, where every motion feels watched though no watcher appears. This is the quiet masterpiece of modern authority, the gaze that moves inside the mind. Foucault called it panopticism, a design where visibility itself becomes control. The original blueprint belonged to Jeremy Bentham, who envisioned a circular prison, a tower at the center, cells arranged around its eye. One observer could see everyone, no prisoner could see him. The brilliance lay not in constant observation but in the possibility of it. The mere suspicion of surveillance disciplined more effectively than whips ever could. The prisoner, never sure of privacy, became his own guardian. Now picture that structure dissolving into daily life. Classrooms, offices, hospitals, airports, each repeats the design in subtler form. Cameras hang like ornaments, forms demand signatures, metrics record behavior. The guard's tower has multiplied, fragmented, merged with light fixtures and login pages. The watchman became code. The prisoners became us. Yet the most elegant evolution occurred within psychology. The outer gaze migrated inward. You learned to monitor tone, posture, productivity, manners. You correct yourself before correction arrives. You censor words not because punishment waits, but because habit whispers restraint. The eye no longer peers from a tower, it speaks from your conscience. Technology merely refined this inheritance. Screens glow with perpetual evaluation, likes, views, ratings, analytics. Algorithms reward compliance through dopamine flashes masquerading as approval. Every click confesses desire, every scroll documents distraction. The digital world functions like Bentham's tower rendered in pixels. You supply data, the system supplies judgment, and the transaction feels voluntary. This omnipresent gaze carries no cruelty, only precision. It quantifies identity through numbers, followers, performance scores, wellness indexes, until the self transforms into dashboard statistics. Underneath the glow of progress lies the oldest hunger of power, prediction. Once behavior becomes predictable, autonomy evaporates. Anticipation replaces command, obedience feels spontaneous. The genius of this mechanism is emotional. Instead of fear, it manufactures guilt. You feel inadequate for resting, anxious when unproductive, proud when overworking. Internalized spectators applaud exhaustion as dedication. The result is perfect subjugation disguised as ambition. No prison guard could enforce such devotion, only desire could. Notice how surveillance expands without appearing sinister. Security cameras promise safety, ID badges claim efficiency, self-tracking apps advertise health. Every instrument insists it exists for your benefit. Control rebrands itself as service. The citizen collaborates, smiling, convinced of convenience. Invisibility ensures permanence. Meanwhile, language itself becomes a cage of politeness. Words like appropriate, professional, civilized define invisible borders of expression. Humor filters through corporate tone, anger translates into feedback, sadness hides behind productivity. Even emotion submits to formatting. You present curated feelings because authenticity risks disapproval. The gaze may be unseen, yet it edits your soul. What makes the Panopticon terrifying is its impersonality. No single tyrant stands behind the lens. Surveillance operates through systems, not villains. Power becomes procedural, algorithmic, automatic. If injustice occurs, responsibility diffuses into code, policy, protocol. The watcher is everyone and no one. How do you rebel against mist? Perhaps the most tragic consequence is the corrosion of spontaneity. When every gesture imagines an audience, sincerity dies. Creativity turns strategic, kindness becomes branding. You perform instead of exist. Even solitude feels performative, you rest to recover enough energy to continue the show. The stage covers the planet. Yet awareness of the gaze offers a doorway. To recognize surveillance is already to disturb its spell. Observation depends on ignorance. Once noticed, it weakens. When you perceive the mechanism, you begin crafting zones of invisibility, moments unmeasured, acts unposted, thoughts unshared. These secret spaces are small revolutions. Still, liberation demands vigilance. The mind accustomed to scrutiny often recreates it. You might leave institutions yet carry their architecture inside, the checklist mentality, the need for validation, the reflex of comparison. True emancipation requires rebuilding perception itself, learning to act without performing, to rest without guilt, to exist without witness. The inner tower can crumble only through lucidity. Lucidity grows when attention turns from judgment to observation, seeing without measuring. When you can watch yourself kindly rather than critically, the machinery loses fuel. Compassion dismantles control more effectively than rage, because it interrupts the cycle of internal punishment. The Panopticon remains humanity's most exquisite illusion, control achieved through participation. Its victory relies on your cooperation, your silent nod each morning as you log in, check metrics, obey routines. The moment you notice the nod, its spell falters. Freedom, then, begins not with escape but with seeing. The eye that once confined can transform into awareness that liberates. To know you are watched is half captivity, to know who watches is half deliverance. The final step is daring to look back, steadily, fearlessly, until the gaze blinks first. The manufacture of normality. Normality feels harmless. It sounds like safety, order, belonging. Yet behind that gentle mask hides one of civilization's most elegant instruments of power. What people call normal is rarely natural. It is a social invention that rewards obedience and punishes deviation. Every generation inherits an unwritten script of acceptable conduct and learns to call its confinement peace. From the first classroom seating chart, difference receives classification. Energetic children become disruptive. Silent ones are told to participate. The grades appear neutral, yet each mark whispers evaluation. The hierarchy of excellence becomes an early rehearsal for adulthood's invisible ranking systems. When you grow, the labels evolve: professional, reliable, well-adjusted. The melody remains identical: fit the pattern, or risk exclusion. Normality thrives by disguising judgment as care. The teacher claims to guide, the employer claims to improve, the doctor claims to heal. In every case, deviation is described as sickness, laziness, immaturity. Control arrives through diagnosis, not decree. Instead of chains, society offers therapy; instead of punishment, it prescribes correction. You are encouraged to seek help until you quietly reshape yourself to match expectations. This process depends on collective fear. To question standards means risking loneliness, ridicule, unemployment. The terror of exclusion outweighs curiosity. So individuals police one another. Families warn against eccentric dreams, colleagues whisper about unprofessional behavior, friends remind you to stay practical. Power no longer shouts from podiums, it circulates through conversation, tone, advice. The majority becomes the warden. Advertising amplifies this rhythm. Screens display perfect households, sculpted bodies, rehearsed smiles. Each image defines the center of acceptability, pushing everyone toward identical desires. Consumption turns conformity into pleasure. Buying the approved lifestyle feels like personal choice while silently confirming submission. The market performs the same task the monarchy once did, maintaining hierarchy, only now with glitter instead of blood. Language anchors the illusion. Words like healthy, productive, stable, respectable carry moral weight disguised as neutrality. A person who rejects overwork becomes unambitious. Someone who avoids crowds is antisocial. Emotion turns pathological, rest becomes laziness, silence suggests failure. Vocabulary itself enforces the borders of legitimacy. Whoever controls adjectives rules perception. Science, too, joins the chorus. Statistical averages transform into ethical ideals. The normal range becomes virtue, even when defined by historical accident or corporate interest. Psychology, medicine, and education collaborate in shaping the model citizen, efficient, predictable, emotionally balanced, conveniently replaceable. The laboratory inherits the throne of morality. This subtle engineering creates a world where the abnormal becomes invisible not by absence but by erasure. Artists are treated as entertainment, not prophets, mystics become patients, rebels turn into motivational speakers once sanitized. The system digests dissent, sells it as novelty, and continues undisturbed. Even resistance becomes fashionable as long as it remains profitable. The tragedy of normality lies in what it destroys. Wonder dies first, followed by authenticity. When everything must align with a metric, the immeasurable withers. People stop listening to intuition, fearing it might contradict consensus. Dreams shrink to fit schedules. The imagination, once infinite, now kneels before efficiency. And yet society applauds this domestication as maturity. Consider how even emotion undergoes standardization. Happiness becomes an obligation, sadness a malfunction. You are expected to smile for photographs, maintain optimism during collapse, exhibit gratitude while exploited. Sincerity frightens those who worship comfort. Genuine feeling exposes the artificial peace normality protects. Thus, we perform contentment while quietly suffocating. Foucault revealed that this mechanism works because it convinces individuals that conformity equals morality. The good person is the obedient one, virtue aligns with regulation. The reward for compliance is belonging, and belonging feels like love. That confusion, between acceptance and affection, ensures participation. People will sacrifice freedom for approval long before they surrender it to force. Breaking this enchantment requires confronting its seduction. It is pleasant to be admired, reassuring to blend in. But awareness exposes the cost, every unspoken opinion, every restrained impulse, every postponed truth represents tribute paid to the empire of normal. Once you notice the tribute, you can choose to stop paying. Dismantling normality does not mean glorifying chaos. It means recovering plurality, the infinite textures of human possibility smoothed out by convention. True harmony does not demand uniform rhythm, it thrives on difference. To embrace that diversity is to reclaim life from metrics. Look closely and you will see, the normal world is a mirror polished so brightly it blinds. Step away, and reflection returns as vision. In the quiet beyond applause, originality breathes again. Freedom begins there, not in rebellion for its own sake, but in the simple, radical act of existing without apology. Lucidity and liberation. Awakening begins as unease. A quiet dissonance creeps into the rhythm of obedience. Tasks once automatic start to sting with absurdity. You look around and realize the choreography no longer fits your pulse. That discomfort, often mistaken for failure, is awareness's first spark. The illusion of order cracks the moment you recognize its design. Seeing the mechanism, however, is easier than walking beyond it. The structures of control live not only in offices or governments but inside habits, relationships, reflexes. Liberation, therefore, cannot arrive through slogans or revolts alone, it must pass through consciousness. True emancipation is internal architecture rebuilt brick by brick. Foucault warned that power survives precisely because it changes masks. When laws lose credibility, it hides in morality. When dogma fades, it wears psychology. When rebellion becomes fashionable, it commodifies protest. Every time awareness expands, the system adapts. Freedom requires agility equal to domination's inventiveness. It demands thinking faster than control can rename itself. Lucidity becomes both shield and weapon. To see clearly is to interrupt hypnosis. When you watch your own impulses with patience instead of guilt, the automatic obedience dissolves. Observation without judgment reclaims interior territory once ruled by punishment. The gaze that oppressed can transform into compassion. Awareness turns surveillance inward, but gently, lovingly, until it becomes understanding rather than tyranny. This shift feels fragile at first. Without external direction, existence resembles open sea. Old certainties vanish, meaning must be created, not inherited. Many retreat at this threshold, preferring the comfort of predictability to the vastness of possibility. Yet courage blooms precisely here, in accepting uncertainty as the price of authenticity. Freedom is not chaos. It is discipline born from choice, not compulsion. It asks for responsibility rather than submission. When you act deliberately, you write law within yourself. When you follow blindly, you copy someone else's decree. Autonomy is craft, practiced daily through attention. Each decision becomes a brushstroke painting the portrait of a sovereign self. The journey outward inevitably transforms relationships. Those who still live inside the script may misread your lucidity as arrogance, madness, or ingratitude. Expect resistance. Systems defend themselves through ridicule. They will call calm defiance, attitude, silence, withdrawal, doubt, negativity. Accept misunderstanding as confirmation of clarity. The freer you become, the less visible you appear to the obedient. To live awake is to dwell in paradox. You continue functioning within institutions yet refuse to let them write your interior monologue. You follow rules when they serve truth, break them when they serve oppression. You practice strategic conformity, appearing to participate while quietly reauthoring the script. Subtle rebellion preserves energy, visible revolt burns it. Wisdom learns when each is necessary. Lucidity also breeds empathy. Once you recognize how thoroughly conditioning molds behavior, hatred dissolves into comprehension. You see that most cruelty stems from fear, most obedience from exhaustion. The awakened eye no longer seeks enemies, it seeks understanding. Compassion becomes radical precisely because it refuses to dehumanize even the blind. However, awareness alone does not guarantee serenity. Seeing everything without anchoring values leads to vertigo. Therefore liberation must root itself in purpose, something chosen, not imposed. Create art, nurture others, cultivate silence, explore thought. Whatever affirms life without demanding conformity becomes foundation. Meaning built from freedom withstands what meaning inherited cannot. The practice of lucidity is endless. The world will reinvent distraction, new screens will promise connection while collecting data, ideologies will disguise dependence as progress. Vigilance must mature into habit, not paranoid watchfulness but conscious presence. To remain lucid is to keep polishing perception until manipulation finds no surface to cling to. Eventually, resistance transforms from struggle into style. You move through cities without performing, converse without pretending, work without worshipping productivity. Simplicity replaces spectacle. Each action aligns with awareness rather than approval. People may not notice, yet your existence itself becomes subversion, a quiet refusal to participate in unconsciousness. And still, the system persists. It will outlive every rebel, but not every idea. Lucidity spreads contagiously. Once tasted, it cannot be untasted. Each person who awakens shifts the collective fabric ever so slightly. The invisible chains loosen not through war but through understanding multiplied. Freedom, finally, is not a destination but a frequency of attention. It lives in moments when you remember to breathe before reacting, to question before agreeing, to feel before performing. It begins again every morning the instant you choose awareness over habit. The world outside may never lose its towers, its cameras, its rankings. Yet within, a space opens that no algorithm can chart, a territory of deliberate being. There, identity ceases to be currency and becomes presence. There, the gaze that once controlled becomes mirror, reflecting consciousness back to itself, silent and unafraid. That silence is victory. Not the roar of revolution, but the stillness of one who finally owns the rhythm of their breath.